Shalom Aleichem. In the hot summer days on Shabbat, when a person needs the air conditioner and the air conditioner stopped working, he forgot to turn it on, it becomes very hot all of the sudden, or whatever it is, can you ask a goy to turn on the air conditioner for you? Minchat Yitzchak writes that it is permitted, and he brings the logic from Shulchan Aruch Siman Resh Ayin Vav in Seif Hey, that it says over there the opposite case, on the winter day. בארצות קרות, מותר לאינו ליהודי לעשות מדורה בשביל הקטנים, ומתירים הגדולים להתחמם בו. The Shulchan Aruch says that in the winter days, when it's cold, you're allowed to ask a goy to even turn for you the fire, to put on the heat in the house, because it's a cold day. Kids could get sick from it. Kids, not necessarily kids, also the elderly, those that are sick, it's not good for them to be in such cold weather, and therefore you're allowed to ask a goy even something that's considered a deoraita to do for you. And those that are adults can benefit once you turn on the heat. They can benefit from it. But if it's very cold, ואפילו בשביל הגדולים מותר עם הקור גדול שהכל חולים יצא אל הקור. Shulchan Aruch says if it's very cold, the Or Letzion writes that it's a freezing point, 32 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius. That's a freezing point. That's already considered very cold. You can ask a goy to turn on the heat for you in that level. Says the Minchat Yitzchak that if that is the case by winter, summer heat is worse than cold in the winter. Where does he know this from? Interesting. Tosfot in Baba Batra Kuf Mem Daled, where Tosfot brings a case that Antoninus, which was a friend of Rebbe, came to Rebbe and asked him that he wants to go on the road and he should give him a blessing, a bracha. And he told him the following. The Yerushalmi tells us this story. Antoninus היה לו ללך בדרך, אמר לרבי, צלי עליי, pray for me, give me a blessing. אמר לי, רבת תשתזיב, מן צינתה. Should be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help you to be saved from the cold. He told him, that's a blessing? אמר לי, that's לא תביט מיה? What kind of prayer is that? יתיר חד כיסו וצינתה אז לה. I can add an extra garment, put a coat, and I'm not as cold anymore. So the Rebbe told him another bracha. Amar le yeravat tishtaziv midshaba. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help that you be saved from the heat. Oh, saving from the weather when it's hot. Amar le havadait tzlota. This is definitely a good blessing, a good prayer. Nobody can be saved from the heat of Hashem Yitbarach. Well, it used to be that in their time, people in the hot days will go into cool places, means that in the shade or in the house, but still it would be extremely hot. And today, Baruch Hashem, that we have air conditions, then definitely, as we explained, if one can ask a goy on the cold days to turn on the heat, definitely you can ask a goy on the hot days to turn on the air conditioners. Why? Because a person could get sick without air conditioning. And although the previous generation poskim wrote that only when it's very hot, one should ask, not when it's just a little bit discomfort, but it's extremely hot. This is how Moshe writes. But it could be that in this generation already, things have changed because people are already adjust their body to air condition. The body doesn't tolerate anymore a room that's hot. And therefore, people get dehydrated much quicker. The body just can't tolerate it. People can get heat strokes. Heat is dangerous. And therefore, such a case, such a scenario would allow a person to ask a goy to turn on the air conditioner for him. Secondly, we can have another leniency, the fact that many poskim hold that electricity is not deoraita. There's a big machloket whether electricity is deoraita or it's the Rabbanan. And therefore, if we hold it's the Rabbanan, and we can rely for this important need that on those poskim that hold it's the Rabbanan. So therefore, asking a goy, it's considered shvut the shvut, the stu the Rabbanan over here. One is asking a goy. That's only prohibited mid the Rabbanan. And second rabbinical prohibition is, as we explained right now, the electricity, the turning on of the air condition. And therefore, since there's a great need over here, so therefore it's shvut shvut, makom tzorech, makom that could come to a choli or whatever it is, and therefore one is permitted to ask a goy to turn on the air condition for him. You can ask him straight out and tell him that he needs to turn on the air condition. Secondly, we have another idea we have another question about adjusting the vents when you have air conditioning, the vents can go to the right, can go to the left, or straight. You usually adjust them manually. If they are electric in any way, that when you touch them, anything electric happens, of course, you can't touch them on Shabbat. But if they're not electric, rather manual, like normal window air conditions, so you can move them around, and that is permitted. It's not considered muktzeh. Huchani writes that it's not considered muktzeh because it's meant for changing whenever you want it, to this side, to that side. You want it cooler towards you, or it's too cool towards you, you move it to the other side. That is permitted. Secondly, it's not a issur that falls under boneh vesoter, building or taking off a building, and it would be asur. He says, no, it's not like that. This is considered like opening and closing a window, and therefore it is permitted, just like it's permitted to close and open a window. What about the fact that when you change the vent to one side or the other, you are changing a little bit of the electricity usage? The electricity is adjusted according to wherever it feels it needs. If you need the air condition to go towards one side, so therefore now the air condition feels, the thermostat feels that he needs to put a little bit more energy, a little bit more electricity towards that side to cool that off. That's the way it's built. And therefore, in the powerhouse, they burn more electricity to provide for that air condition. Is that permitted or not? Rav Elyashiv really prohibited. He said it's not allowed to move because of that reason. Same idea we learned already in a fan. One is not allowed, according to Rav Elyashiv, to push the fan button that causes it to spin, because then there's a little bit more of usage of electricity. But as we explained by the fan that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach allowed it over there, same thing he would allow it over here by air conditioning, because of the same reason. What is the reason? We said the air conditioner indeed could be using more electricity, but it's so little, so minute, it's not felt to the senses. And anything that's not felt to our senses, it's not part of the prohibition of Shabbat. And therefore over here, when you change, you don't feel that change at all. It's something that is so little. Only when you have digital numbers that tell you what the air condition level is, what the temperature is, sometimes you'll see that, and that should be covered in order not to see it when you do such a thing. But on regular air conditioners, when you don't have that, definitely there's no question that this should be permitted. Secondly, says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata, brings all that it is allowed because it's a grama, which means when you do that, something has changed, not here, it changed in the powerhouse, which is very far away from here, and it doesn't happen right away. And therefore, such a far thing that happens, it doesn't happen immediately. Therefore, such a thing would be grama and would be permitted when you have other reason to permit, as we're saying over here. Thirdly, it could be that there's no change at all. We don't know exactly what happens. It could be that exactly on that time it adjusts itself to the same degree or whatever it is, and therefore we don't know for sure that there is a change in the usage, in the electricity usage. Therefore, he says that it is permitted. When you have a smart thermostat, that you walk into a room and then once you walk into a room, it adjusts and then it works more because you open the door of the house and heat came in, the cold in the house came out, and therefore it needs to now work a little bit harder, adjust itself. Can you walk into such a room? The poskim permitted doing such a thing as well, for the reasons that we explained here, and more reasons that also when you are doing such a thing, you walk into the house. So out of the house, you don't mean at all that the air condition should, that the cold air should come out. So you're not interested in that. Same idea the poskim wrote in opening the fridge. When you open the fridge, the cold inside comes out, the heat from the outside comes in, but you're not interested in that. It's davar she'eno mitkaven. You're not intending for it. You're not benefiting from it. You don't want that thing, that exchange should happen. And therefore, when it is the air conditioner adjusts to it, that you're not interested in that. In what causes it to adjust itself, and therefore they hold that it is permitted, especially that it happens in the thermostat far from where you're walking in. That will be permitted. The poskim permit that, and therefore using a smart thermostat to adjust your air condition would not prohibit you from walking into the house, and walking into the room, walking out, and so on. Many times in the air conditions, you have a leakage. The air condition makes there's drops of water that comes out from the exchange of the heat into the cold, and therefore you sometimes that drips in the house itself, especially by those window air conditioners if you don't put them correctly. So instead of dripping outside the house, they'll drip in the house. Are you allowed on Shabbat, if that happens, to put a bucket of water to catch that water? So first we need to know that this water is considered muktzeh. It's nolad. It was not here in the world before Shabbat, and now it somehow is created. That's considered nolad, and therefore it's muktzeh. Whenever it's muktzeh, not only you're not allowed to take it, but you're also not allowed to put a vessel under it, because putting a vessel under it that was able to be used before and now you're putting muktzeh into it is considered mevatel kli me'echado. You're making that vessel not useful anymore in Shabbat, which is not permitted to do. But if it happens in a place that you are, for instance, in the living room, and it makes the place dirty, wet, uncomfortable, unpleasant, it would be permitted to put that vessel over there. Why? Because we're dealing with a graf sheloi, something that makes the place unpleasant. This is how the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata brings down. And once the bucket is filled to the top and you need to throw the water and put it back, that would be also permitted for the same reasons. Many times, the air conditions, if it's put correctly, it spills the water outside the house. But when it spills the water outside the house, there's another problem over there. That is, you have over there plants, grass, and on Shabbat, the water spills over there, and it becomes, and it causes it to grow. It's one of the melachot of Shabbat called zorea. You're not allowed to do such a thing. But this will be permitted because you started the air condition before Shabbat, and on Shabbat you're not touching it, you're not doing anything. Therefore, putting the air condition from Shabbat, although you know that it will happen on Shabbat, is not part of the prohibition, and it is permitted.